Hi everyone, it's Adam and Emily here, and we've got a quick video message today about learning and teaching via Zoom. And we're going to just chat through a few quick tips about Zoom and the ways that we can work the best online, remembering that this is a cloud first unit. So many of us are making the transition to being online, but of course, in the workplace and in many other settings, being online is something that is the norm these days. It's something we have to get really good at, and it's also not going to be going anywhere. So I was chatting to my classes in Geelong last week about teaching via Zoom and learning via Zoom and some of the different strategies we could use. And one of the things we talked about was being visible on Zoom. And this is something that Adam and I have actually written an article about recently. And I would invite Adam to say something, but I'm actually not really feeling like he's here because I can't see him.
Can I take it off now?
Please do, Adam.
Thanks. I don't know why I do that when you ask me to. Um, yeah, I think that this is a nice little video to make at this point, and thanks for joining me for it. That people are a little bit skeptical and a little bit uncertain slash not really necessarily always liking the idea of transitioning to Zoom. And I think that this isn't, and I'll be perfectly transparent about it, this is an intentional strategy. It's not something that's been mandated this particular trimester, although I'm looking to experiment in different ways with the blended kind of engagement in lots of different ways. As you said, this is a cloud first unit, and that's a lofty university term that basically means that we're privileging the online because this is about making social media. And in the past, I think a nice anecdote to start with, I don't know if you remember, we used to say for years, because we've been using Zoom, I feel like since 2016, 2017. I don't know. I started with Hangouts and then Zoom came along and I was straight on it. We used to say to students, come along to Zooms, and these are mostly cloud students, obviously, and put it on your CV that you can use Zoom, because most people don't know what it is. Now it would seem like a silly thing, probably, to put it on your CV, but actually being able to use Zoom and being able to really use Zoom and perform on it and be visible and be able to, put it into practice, be actually a participant, is a really great skill that a lot of people, not only in education, are struggling with. And so I think that that's part of the reason, a big part of the reason why we're actually, as of week 7, going online in a bigger way for Burwood and Geelong students.
That's right. And I think a really important thing to remember is, as you've said, it's a really important skill. It does, performing on Zoom or being visible on Zoom and interacting well online isn't something that necessarily comes naturally. It does feel different because it is different. We've got a different conduit, we've got a camera in front of us, we've got a computer screen. We don't have that physical person-to-person immediate feedback, but there is so much that you can actually achieve using Zoom that is harder to do when you're actually in a physical classroom. And if you do put your camera on and you are visible, there's lots of non-verbal cues that we can still take, and there's lots of extra features in Zoom. As I joked to my class last week, I actually had trouble splitting the class into small groups because I've been doing it for so long using breakout rooms on Zoom that I mucked it up the first time I tried to do it. I couldn't count properly and didn't divide people up, and the class thought it was hilarious. But there's lots of things you can do via Zoom that are easy and streamlined, and it still produces a really enjoyable collaborative environment to learn in. So I've been in many situations recently, even with colleagues and in various professional meetings, where it's not really the majority of people that will turn their cameras on. So to be people who do that and do it just out of habit really will benefit you, and it will make your experience more enjoyable, because speaking to black squares isn't particularly enjoyable for a teacher. It makes it harder to jump in. There's a bit of a barrier there, and it's also much easier for students to join in when you know that you can see each other.
And that's the thing, that Zoom is being used a lot across the board at various institutions, not just universities, but it's not necessarily always encouraged, and sometimes somewhat concerningly it's even discouraged for students to share their cameras, to share their mics, and maybe it's a little bit of an add-on at the end of a seminar. And Emily and I have done a range of interviews lately that are really showing the evidence of this. So we're really invested in you learning how to use Zoom and how to be on Zoom in the same ways that, and it's not like the other online forms of communication are disappearing as well. I've been saying since week one, the hashtag is where the real learning is. So we're actually deprioritizing the seminars. They're still useful, relevant, essential, great, but in the end, you're doing social media, and there's been a lot of great tweeting and media making and sharing during seminars. It's not to say that it can't happen via Zoom as well. And we might even get an enhanced, increased attendance, given that attendance traditionally drops off. And we never get universal attendance, but attendance and participation generally drops off throughout a trimester on campus as well for various reasons. So the other thing, I thought I'd share a couple of anecdotes around, and I thought I might start with world leaders. I didn't really think of this until you were talking there. I remember my favorite moment of Zoom in 2020 was watching a little news bite of a Zoom meetup, video conferencing, I assume it was Zoom, by European leaders for a big summit or whatever it was. And I remember like seeing Angela Merkel from Germany, like really massively influential figures, looking down, sort of having their heads at the bottom of the screen, trying to work out, is this on? What's going on? And it's like, the intern is definitely going to get fired. They're communications people. And they were just awful. People framing themselves. We've seen that in the workplace, that people are sort of in darkened rooms. My sister told me about my niece's teacher was in sort of a dark basement in the sofa in the middle of a bland, blank room, delivering video content and that kind of thing. So people don't necessarily know how to position themselves, how to light themselves, so that they can be even visible when they're visible. And also there was some great, another instance in 2020, I went to a meeting of the International Association of Business Communicators, which was held overseas via Zoom. Another thing about, the great benefits that Zoom offers is we've got so many more industry events that are now available for students. One student rocked up to this event that I've been promoting on Twitter, and that one student was the one person apart from the host and the speaker who was showing themselves on the screen. And it was, I remember I talked to you after it, and it was like, that student, if anyone there, and particularly the host and the speaker, want to be in touch with someone after that event, it's probably going to be that student, because they're the one person they're definitely sure was there, was listening, and actually was also engaging with their microphone and through some comments on Zoom. So that's a pretty, intimidating thing. If you think going to a seminar in Zoom, going to an industry event that's basically a global event and doing that is pretty impressive. Now, I talked to my cousin last week, completely the opposite experience for her. She is the executive vice president of a major Australian company that's got offices in several countries and that basically works in over 60 countries, I believe, in terms of delivering their products. She is head of a team in marketing, and she said she's really struggling to get her employees, who are paid to go on Zoom because they are paid to do their work and collaborate as a team. She's really struggling to get them focused, to get them engaged. So, all these kinds of things are really, really important and have real world benefit beyond the unit. But as we say, we still think that a lot of students out there sharing a tweet, engaging in conversation with their peers on the hashtag will still be a step outside the comfort zone. And we really want to try and promote more of that by, well, if nothing else, you save a bit of traffic time getting to the campus or public transport time. Maybe there's a little bit of time you can set aside to engage online and build that online presence that everyone was aspiring in the first exercise and the week 1 and 2 discussions to strengthen their online presence. So again, think back to that and how you might be able to do that in the several weeks ahead.
Absolutely. And enjoy the experience. This is the chance to experiment with some tools that Zoom has and have some fun with it and use this to become proficient in using Zoom. And you will be that student later on at a professional meeting, even in the next year. You never know where opportunities may come from, and you will be the one who's visible and remembered because you simply turned on your camera and interacted with other people. So it's hard to stand out, but it's also not very hard. So let's enjoy the experience together.
That's a really great note to end on, but I'll end on another note, actually, just while I think of it. Last word, freak. I mean, you'll notice Emily and I have probably done heaps of Zooms and made heaps of videos with Zoom, and I've got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points that I've only glanced at twice, and I've already covered everything on there. And we had a very brief kind of, planning chat around this video, but you get better at things. But speaking of that, and you really should, when you're recording a video, you should turn your email off, which is my fault. We'll just say it's yours then.
Yeah, blame it on me, as always.
But you're not going to be recorded. You're not going to be making videos. Some students in the cloud have actually been doing that last week, which was great. But even screenshots, your tutor will, if you take a group screenshot, which obviously looks a lot better if people are sharing their cameras, that will be given, you'll be given time to turn your camera off if you don't want that publicly shared. These are, you won't think of them as private, but they're not recorded or live streamed. So, think of it as basically a seminar where it would be pretty weird if everyone showed up in Burwood and Geelong, well, let's say 2/3 to everyone in the room with a box on their head like I was wearing at the start, because that's what essentially it is if you're teaching an interactive live seminar via Zoom and people aren't sharing their cameras and microphones. So keep that in mind. And to end with the last one note, we just submitted a journal article on teaching with Zoom, as I think Em mentioned earlier on. One of the final points made in that article was Zoom is not going to go away with a vaccine. So I think that that's sort of a good point to end on. Oh, thanks very much, Em. It's great chatting.
Thanks, Adam. Bye.
I'm going to go back to my box. That's cool.